We're live.
Moving and grooving, bobbing and weaving. I don't know where the boxer metaphors are coming from, but today we're going to be talking about The Killer, not a movie that has other words associated with it. That movie will come later once you watch that, but this one is just called The Killer.
Wait, which do you mean?
Killers of the Flower Moon.
I thought you meant the Killers with that I forget his name, the Lee guy from Dirty Dozen, Marvin Lee.
I don't know that movie.
Oh, it's a great movie.
Shit. Oops.
Lee Marvin's the main character. They're like hitmen. It's Ronald Reagan's final movie.
No.
And he's the villain. It's an incredible movie. I really, really like it.
An amazing lead into his presidency, Ronald Reagan, and he's the villain.
Mm-hmm. This was well before he was president. This was like before he was even governor of California. It has John Cassavetes. It's a really good movie.
Oh God, I Googled it and a 2010 movie with the same name came up, which is definitely not what you're talking about.
So the one I'm talking about is an adaptation of an Ernest Hemingway
story. What year did it come out?
64.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, so the tangents. Let's bring it on back here.
The Killers, directed by Stanley Kubrick.
Shush. We're talking about The Killer, which came out in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
It's directed by David Fincher.
Mm-hmm.
Shut the hell up. So we covered David Fincher in a previous episode, which we did not. I don't know if you watched the movie, but I didn't watch that other movie that came out. What's it called? Mank. Yeah.
I did not yet dive into Mank. No.
So yeah, until we get on that one, we wanted to talk about this one. Well, I did at least, just because I recently watched it. I pretty much will watch anything that David Fincher makes, and
except Mank, apparently.
I said pretty much. Yeah, and I actually think that you and I have some differing opinions on this one, which should be fun to talk about. I guess we can start out with the general like plot here. Damn, you're a man of class now? Sipping Pellegrino at 10:45 a.m.
It's a good digestif.
Yeah, what happened? Who am I talking with?
What do you mean?
I didn't know that you were a man of class.
Always enjoyed San Pellegrino.
Bottled in from the Swiss and Italian Alps.
Mm-hmm. I think this one might be from Italy.
Yeah, anyway, the general plot of this movie, it opens with this guy who is, I guess you could call it a penthouse, but he's just like at the top of some building and it's just him there. It's very sparse room, and he clearly is like casing sort of like the streets of Paris below him, as well as a building or buildings across the way. And I mean, the name of the movie is The Killer, so assumedly, he is an assassin. Like, it doesn't take much to put two and two together there. And yeah, it's oh man, what's this guy's name again?
Michael Fassbender.
Michael Fassbender, yeah.
Or the character's name.
No, Michael Fassbender.
The character's name is the Killer.
Oh, good.
Doesn't have a name.
Yeah, so he's a very similar to The Room. He's very sparse. He's thin, in shape, toned guy who's very methodical. with his regimen, I would say. The opening kind of reminded me a lot of like Hitchcock with like spyglass shots, and then similar vibe to like Rear Window, but instead of Jimmy being stuck in a wheelchair, this guy is just like ready to shoot someone clearly. So he also has like American Psycho like precision calculation and like execution of just trying to be the best that he can be.
Well, at least that's how he thinks of himself.
Yes, that's how he bills himself and explains himself. He's methodical and procedural, and it sets up the very beginning of the movie where he is trying to shoot a guy, and then it builds up tension really well. I specifically recall he has like a heart monitor like on his watch, and it shows like his heartbeats per minute. And when he's about to shoot the gun, he has to like lower that, obviously. And then he fucks it up. he doesn't end up.
Job.
Yeah, he shoots someone he wasn't supposed to shoot.
A dominatrix.
Yep, a Jezebel, if you will. Yeah, sorry, that word was used in Barbie, and it was fresh on the mind.
Well, we didn't say the opening line of the movie. It's amazing how physically exhausting it can be to do nothing. If you are unable to endure boredom, this work is not for you. Which ends up being a meta-narrative one-liner that kind of describes the film pretty well.
Yeah, and I think you and I like that to varying degrees. I mean, it reminds me of The Prestige with lines like, "Are you watching closely?" And stuff like that. But it obviously has a different message here, which is just like, yeah, if you can't take watching a guy do yoga by himself up in a penthouse preparing for shooting someone, and then the whole rest of the movie, which is kind of similar in his preparation or trying to discover stuff, then maybe you should turn this movie off. Just like your brain.
Well, it also reminds you that you're watching a movie.
Yeah.
So it helps to describe to you how physically exhausting sometimes it can be to watch a movie, especially one as procedural as this one.
Yeah. I really enjoyed the beginning because it sets the tone of the movie, but also of this guy, and it's just like, oh, this guy's perfect at his job. He like clearly has everything prepared and laid out for the surgical precision of this kill. He clearly can't make mistakes. Like, look at him, he's even lowering his heart rate before shooting, and then he fucked it up. It was all for naught. Yeah. There's another, I mean, we'll go into some of the quotes, but I think this is like following his mess up. He says like he because there's part of it where he's talking over what's happening. And he says, "Well, you've done what you can do." And then he's like looking at himself in the mirror in like the airport or the train station, and he just goes, "Hey." I just really enjoyed the writing of the dialogue in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think it's a well-written movie. It's really funny. It's very dry humor though.
Yeah.
Like sort of blink and you miss it references to itself and some of the other like subject matter.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean the plot is very straightforward, even though it bills itself as a sort of straightforward thriller. It really isn't, just because of sort of how slow and non-action packed it is. But basically, once he makes a mistake, he just makes a series of like compounding mistakes. So he like goes home to the Dominican Republic, and his girlfriend has been attacked. So then he decides to just like hunt down the people who hired him, because he wants revenge / he wants to make sure they won't keep sending people after him and or his girlfriend.
Yeah.
As like in terms of most thrillers are either built on suspense and or action set pieces. Like I don't know what like Hitchcock is you definitely always a really good example. His
Mhm.
movies are entirely built on suspense. More modern thrillers are usually built on action with intermingling moments of suspense. It's like suspense leads to big action set pieces. Because you compared this sort of to a James Bond movie.
It
Uh,
feels like Hitchcock doing Bond in some way or another. Like almost. At least the beginning for sure is Hitchcockian. I don't know about halfway to three-quarters of the way, but
oh, for
if
me, it
if
feels
Hitchcock
like
if Hitchcock
Melville doing Bond.
mm, yeah, that's a better description. Not the writer what's his name? Henry?
Some French guy.
Philip?
No, 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 Philip. It's Jean Pierre.
Jean-Pierre.
Yeah, he's a French fella. Because yeah, if there was a single movie I could describe this as being similar to, it would be Le Samurai.
Yeah,
Just
that's it.
because the plot is very similar and the characters are kind of similar.
Yeah, they also kind of look similar just with what they're wearing. Um, it
Alain
it does
Delon.
it does take place in Paris, or at least it starts in Paris,
Mhm.
um, as well, which is another similarity. Um,
I think what you're highlighting more is that David Fincher probably owes a debt of gratitude most largely to Hitchcock more than anyone else, which
stylistically, it's not the same as Hitchcock. However, I mean, this is probably not the last time I'll use the word, but the precision with which he himself as a director takes, as well as the editing with all of his movies, is extremely surgical. Um, you can see it with the cuts happening, like all of the cuts are just expertly planned out to be like 3 to 6 seconds for some type of effect. Like it's not just like a cut in. I don't want to like. I don't know. I'm probably just going to go off on a tangent where I'm basically bowing down at the feet of Fincher, but it's clearly very intended. All of the cuts for the most part, with like moving on to a different place or a different scene, as well as what the characters are thinking. Which for me references like the book Ways of Seeing, which I still need to finish, but like every time there's a cut, you're ready for like the next bit of information, and that's perfectly like planned out and plotting forward.
it's done so deliberately that it becomes dry, in my
Yes.
opinion.
Yeah.
But that's like I think the bigger intent of this movie on the whole is to be as like to mock precision or to mock the pursuit of precision and craft at that level. Because as soon as a mistake is made, it basically starts cascading. Because if your whole goal is to be super well planned and regimented, when a mistake happens, it can be really hard to actually, move backwards and correct the mistake.
Yeah, I don't know that I agree with you about the dry factor. If I do agree with you, I like that about it.
This is one of the most boring movies I've ever seen. In terms of like it de-emphasizes narrative over just like very routine decision making as the character describes said routine. Like obviously there are moments of, anticipation and suspense that come from every time he like actually goes to attack or kill someone,
Mhm.
but that's like a very small percentage of the movie. Most of the time he's just like moving place to place or watching someone.
Yeah, all of that is true.
I'm not saying that like I'm not ascribing a connotation to the word dry. Like I
Sure,
don't think it's
sure.
bad. I don't think boring necessarily means bad either.
Yeah, I
Just
mean,
in terms of like what is a very standard, like what a narrative is people are accustomed to with something like this, like a thriller type movie.
yeah, I think if you took if you took what you're saying and you just overlaid a different plot where the guy wasn't a killer, but he was just a writer, or like he just ran a bookshop somewhere, it would be the same movie without the fight scenes. Like it's just a guy who's like watching people do things, and then he participates within that life in some way or another. But because he is a killer, that's sort of like where the interest lies, I guess. And because it's a botched job, you're kind of trying to figure out like where it's gonna go. I guess we can also quickly kind of explain what ends up happening as well. If you are planning on watching it, then I would just pause right now and then stop listening, watch the movie, and then listen to this if you so choose. But basically, as Nolan said, his girlfriend in the Dominican Republic is hospitalized, like basically nearly killed. And it seems clear that their intention was killing her, whoever did that to her. And so he starts hunting down the people that did it to her, but then also the people who were pulling the strings, which is basically this guy who is sort of the middleman between hitmen, or hit people rather, because there are obviously hit women out there. And not people who hit women, but assassin women. And anyway, so he like traces it back to the guy who has the like Rolodex from people who call hits, and he essentially dispatches of this guy in order to find other people who were involved in it. And then he ends up going to, I don't know if it's Miami, but it is Tampa or Florida. It's somewhere in Florida. And there's oh, you're muted.
St. Petersburg.
St. Petersburg, yeah. And he goes there, and this was my favorite part of the movie because it's where like a lot of the fighting actually happens. And then he gets into an altercation with the people there. I'm gonna skip over that because we'll get back to that part. Obviously, he still survives that, and then he hunts down another assassin and dispatches of her when she tries to fake slip down stairs to get him after a nice meal. And then he actually like eventually hunts down the guy that like called the hit on him because it was a botched job basically. And he goes into this guy is like a multi-billionaire, like something insane. And he gets into his like apartment, and it's this great moment where, I mean, you clearly just assume he's gonna, shoot him in the face. But the threat is that he'll just keep coming back if this dude, because he just makes the point like it was so easy for him to get in there that he can just have access to kill him at any moment in time.
Yeah, so, he like buys the tools on Amazon.
Yeah, that was a scary scene for me because I lived in an apartment complex that did not have any keys. It was the fobs. And then he literally just buys a fob reader, steals one from the janitor, and then just makes duplicates of the fob, which is something I had always thought that people could do, but never realized how easy it was. And that is just horrifying to think about. I mean, you can do the same thing with keys as well, but yeah, not good. Yeah, so then like the whole sort of point of the movie is that he doesn't end up being the killer in the end. Like he doesn't kill the guy, despite there being the threat that at any point in time he can come back and kill him. That's the basic rundown of the movie, and then it ends with him at his like villa in the DR with his wife or girlfriend.
Special lady friend.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we can work our way through some of the quotes and some of the sort of other things that are tethered to the plot itself and what that kind of reveals about the movie. I do definitely agree with you that it is dry. Um, I don't know. I'm at a loss for words because it's not really that it's objective, if you will, but it does feel rather like Hemingway-esque with the way that it just shows like a scene and a character is just watching or like taking part in it. And even if he's like talking over the scene, it's not adding like all that much more to that experience to you. Like there's not like a spice to it, like you're saying, or like a bite to it.
I mean,
The
even the color palette is muted to the point of being like I wouldn't say necessarily like background wallpaper, but like even look at the two
Yeah,
images we chose.
yeah.
There are a lot of grays and greens, very muted blues, not a lot of very warm, strong colors. The only time
Hmm.
the strong colors come up is when he actually commits a murder
Yeah.
or in the hospital. So those warm colors are usually meant to show like the sort of frightened state of mind the killer is in. Because I do agree with you. I think the directorial style is meant to be very objective, and that's something Fincher always kind of does. He doesn't dabble necessarily in the subjective feeling of his characters. He lets his characters sort of operate in a world that is bigger than they are. This is just a rare film for him because the point of view character we have that we're examining as he examines the world is one that is monologuing all the time. And we
Yeah.
basically see an incongruence between him and his own monologues. Because his monologues say, like, you can't have empathy, but he's shown constantly to have empathy, and his
Hmm.
empathy in situations causes him to make more mistakes.
Yes.
Like, all the time, he's, writing out these rules that even he doesn't follow, or at least doesn't follow to the letter of the law.
Yeah, that's how the whole beginning goes, right? With him running through that sort of like you have to do this, you have to be devoid of empathy, you have to I'll find the exact quote here, but then like yeah, when he fucks up the shot, like that's exactly why. Stick to your plan, anticipate, don't improvise, trust no one, never yield an advantage, fight only the battle you're paid to fight. Which he kind of sticks to when he messes it up, but then he kind of did improvise and messes it up. And then the whole rest of the movie he's improvising.
Yeah,
That's sort of the point. Which
it's
I think
reinforced by the soundtrack being almost entirely the Smiths.
yes.
Like
Yeah.
music about sad, lonely people and like being self-aware of reveling in your own loneliness, which is basically the thing the killer does constantly. Because deep down, he is a much simpler guy than he gives himself credit for by, not being able to just brutally kill people and feel nothing about it. Because the murders do seem to bother him.
Yes. They absolutely do, and that's where the movie crescendos. Um Forbid empathy, empathy is weakness, weakness is vulnerability, and he possesses empathy, therefore he possesses weakness, therefore he is vulnerable, hence the fact that he doesn't kill the guy in the end. Um, and also hence why he is able to be like at a villa in DR with his special lady friend at the very end. um, yeah, I think the very last quote he says, "The need to feel secure is a slippery slope. Fate is a placebo, the only life path, the one behind you." Um, which I thought was just an awesome, awesome way of finishing off the movie. Because clearly, I mean, dear God, I don't want to get into like a philosophical debate here, but this movie is very much like individualistic and like your own sort of response to the world. Like, I mean, fate is a placebo, right? Like, if you just believe in fate, you're just chalking up your entire life to just like, oh, well, that's how it is, because everything happens for a reason.
I mean, I just find the entire thing to be ironic, which is because fate saves him repeatedly.
Yeah, Yeah, I apologize, but I'm gonna need to take a pause here. Yeah, so I guess I do want to get into the philosophical nature of the movie because as I said, it is very much like individualistic and flying in the face of fate as opposed to just being resigned to the fact that I mean, he messed up the job and his life is now like over, right? He chooses to respond to that and do something about it, a la killing all of the people that are associated with harming him or his woman.
But then he just submits completely to fate at the end of the movie anyway.
Yeah, by
Like he's
not
just
killing the guy.
hoping, yeah, he's just hoping that there won't be consequences for his actions.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely something in there to parse out in regards to also money as well, because the guy that I mean, he also just has like more money than he ever needs as well. Um, so are you saying that the movie is just saying to give in to fate? Like, what do you think its stance is on fate then?
It's saying it's unavoidable, like as a concept, like you can't just say like, yeah, I will be totally uh, like he believes himself to be completely self-aware and independent. Like he's so assured of his own abilities and his own place in the world that he can forego fate or outside circumstance to affect him.
But he can't.
No, and
Yeah.
repeatedly it does, and then at the end he just puts his life up to fate, like
Hmm.
while saying, "Oh yeah, I reject that entirely." But that's like his character. The entire movie is contradictory, hypocritical. I just find the movie to be very ironic in that sense,
Yes.
like very
No,
deliberately so.
I would definitely agree with you on that.
Like
Um,
if I'm not making it clear, I think this is an incredible movie. Like I think this is like top shelf filmmaking. It just emphasizes craft and a level of like irony and like these sardonic monologues that mesh really well with the Smiths, but it very much is like an anti it's sort of against mainstream filmmaking. It's against certainly mainstream thrillers. Like it feels like a reaction to the glut of very generic, boring thrillers that have inundated movie theaters and certainly Netflix, of which this is an original from for the last decade.
oh yeah, it definitely feels like a response to that. Um,
That's why it sucks all of the energy out of it. Like it
yeah.
sucks out the stylistic action scenes. It sucks out the like quippy one-liners or whatever, or like even long suspended moments of tension. Because this movie has very, very few like deeply tense moments. Like the one you mentioned was like the where he kills the whatever his name is, not the butcher, the big the brute.
Hmm.
Like that, and vaguely the scene where he like tortures the dude with the nail gun.
Oh God. Yeah. Yeah. The more I'm replaying the visuals from this, the more it does feel like La Samurai. It's just like La Samurai is very much like understated with very little action. I mean, there are chase scenes in it, um, but I mean up until the end. Uh,
Yeah, and I have no doubt that David Fincher is a big fan of Jean-Pierre Melville, but
oh yeah,
uh, I mean Melville himself was able to make tons of those very understated thrillers that were just like precision and very well like not only like Samurai, but like the Red Circle, But then on the other end, he was also capable of making a film like Un Flick, which is just like a bombastic, style-filled rampage.
Yeah, Jesus Christ. I can't wait. I can't wait to do Melville actually. We got to add that to the list. Yeah. His movies are just so enjoyable. They're like a nice like afternoon uh movie, I would say. Some of them are like great for like an evening fare, but I find his movies to just be awesome like afternoon watches to set yourself up for like a great night. That's how I feel about his movies. I did want to emphasize here I I really want to get into some of the quotes because you mentioned the monologues, the sardonic monologues that are also very much like procedural that also ironically fly in the face of the character, right? Because he's like explaining to you how he is this like perfect individualistic killer, and then like what you're seeing is him also kind of like going going and doing the opposite or something that's not quite the opposite. But this quote here that seems like a throwaway line, I found very funny and telling of him. There are 1,500 McDonald's in France, a good enough place to grab 10 grams of protein for €1, alongside the other 46 million they serve each week. It's like you're looking at him, you're looking at Michael Fassbender, and you're like, bro, you don't eat at McDonald's, man. Also, living in Paris, or at least staying there for an extended period of time, and going to McDonald's is just really funny in and of itself. Um,
Well, I think that's one of them. Like a lot of those lines. There's another one that's like, "Ah, the Sunshine State. Where else you can find so many like-minded individuals outside a penitentiary? Hope they're not planning a sleepover."
yeah.
Like all of those lines work together really well with the style, with the music from the Smiths to make fun of this kind of character. Like that's kind of what the Smiths are about. As much as the Smiths are earnest in their depiction of loneliness and feeling like an outsider, ultimately it is a very mainstream feeling. Like it's something that everyone feels. But describing it as being you putting yourself outside of it and looking in and saying, ah, the sheep, ah, the, pretending to be better than, which is what the killer ultimately does.
hmm I mean I think this movie, I think we're starting to get somewhere, at least, or at least maybe I would say I am getting somewhere in understanding a lot of the larger meta narratives, because I think you understand it a lot more. Um, is that Finch, like, this movie does feel like Fincher kind of like trying to explain his place within cinema and like his place within the world. Um, in some way, it's him expressing that. I don't know how explicitly he would say it is that, but it does feel like him psychoanalyzing himself in a way of being like, okay, I this is kind of how I try to do things, but then I also like it is ironic because I also am part of this class or part of this system or group as well. Because like he is in Hollywood while also operating outside of Hollywood in some way or another.
I would say he's like as mainstream a filmmaker as you get.
Yeah. Yeah,
He's
I
a
mean,
pioneer and he's definitely at the top of his craft, but
right.
like in our episode where we talked about him, like a huge part of what has happened to him in the last 15 years is being the pioneer to move to streaming.
hmm
Like he
hmm
was just one of the first major directors, filmmakers, storytellers to get there and flesh that space out and experiment and still not be able to have enduring long-term success or humongous success that his peers did because he has uncompromising vision.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Upon like looking at these quotes though from that lens, like it does make a lot more sense as well. Um, to him explaining like his own place within cinema. Um, shit, where was it? I lost it. Oh, assembling a rifle. When it comes to bystanders getting involved, everything becomes a blur. Combat veterans call this tunnel vision. I call it occupational good fortune. And then the digital door lock like hits and he just turns and looks at it. This is one of my favorite lines. He tails the brute and his bros to the strip club and they like get out. Maybe a mandatory 30-day waiting period for creatine's not a bad idea. What's interesting is there's also a lot of these quotes that are like either three sentences, like three sort of choppy sentences, or sorry, I'm nerding out on an English teacher level here syntactically, but one of the sentences is shorter. Typically, the second one is a bit longer, and then the last one is kind of like very cutting, where it starts to move the ideas into a different place. It's either three or four sentences typically.
Yeah, it does that pretty consistently. I don't know how much of this writing is so this is an adaptation of like a French comic or something, a French graphic novel.
Oh shit, just had no idea.
Yeah, so I actually think that a lot of this is probably just lifted straight from that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Whether or not the character in the comic listens to the Smiths, I have no idea.
I find music a useful distraction, a focus tool, keeps the inner voice from wandering.
Meanwhile, his inner voice is just fucking Morrissey, so nice try, killer.
Morrissey?
Yeah, the lead singer of the Smiths.
Oh, okay, that's what I thought you were saying. Well, this is new. WWJWBD. What would John Wilkes Booth do? Throws the gun in the river. Yeah, I like legitimately think I will revisit this movie in the next 5 years because I thoroughly enjoyed it. Um, I may have just been in a really good mood when I watched it. I'm not sure, but it just clicked with everything that I wanted from a movie. Yeah, when I watched it. I think it's the blend of the dialogue that's kind of like punchy and ironic while also being philosophical mixed with what he's doing visually. I mean, as well as like we mentioned this before, but it is very much like spy centric James Bond esque in a lot of um, the visuals, the scenery, the actual like locations that they're in, right? Because you have Paris, you have Dominican Republic. Uh, where else does he go? Is it New York?
Chicago, New York, Florida, New
Right.
Orleans.
Yes. Yeah.
New Orleans.
It just doesn't take as long as Bond of like those overhead shots that
It
are
doesn't, yeah, it doesn't romanticize the locations the way that a spy movie normally would.
like
Because it's not about the character being stylistic there, it's about the character trying to hide there.
yes, trying to hide or to like navigate through as opposed to Bond, which is like bigger and suaver than the environment he's in most of the time.
Yeah, I would say this is just a better movie than every Bond movie.
For sure. For sure.
Like
I mean the beginning of the movie itself has like such tension and suspense, and basically that like the if you took the scene from the beginning of this movie, that's the level that the Bond movies try to get to by the 3/4 mark of like, oh, this is the climax of the movie, and it just does that within the first 15 minutes
with
him trying to shoot that guy.
oh, I guess so. I mean the Bond movies are just doing something else.
Yeah, I
Like the
think they're doing
new,
something worse.
like the last 10 Bond movies are basically just no frills action movies, and the ones before that are some kind of weird form of like romantic espionage. I don't know. I'm the wrong person to ask because I think the majority of those movies are poorly made and
it's
just badly
I
written. But
Yeah, I think there's a deep irony within the Bond movies, at least for myself, because I grew up loving reading them, of just them being sort of these, as you said, romanticized, like I don't even know how I would describe it. They're almost this romanticized, like, or orgasmic expression of masculinity is basically how they feel. So for like a young boy who's growing up, of just like, this dude is a spy, all the women love him, he can do whatever he wants. He's got the money, he's got the looks, he goes to all these exotic locations. Obviously that's going to pander to like a young kid. But then the
mhm.
older I get and the more movies of Bond that I watch, the more you see a lot of the sort of, I don't know that I would say like darker edges of masculinity, but just like, it just pales in comparison with other movies such as this, that do something outside of just like, oh yeah, he's a spy. Oh yeah, he does spy shit, and look how cool he looks when he's doing that. Like, obviously there are Bond movies that stick out in some way or another, but additionally,
For me, it's more so like how self-aware they are
Mhm.
because the worst ones, as in the most schlocky, most insane ones, are the ones with Pierce Brosnan. Like
Mhm.
those are the least realistic, most akin to a fantasy. Um, and they make fun of the character of James Bond versus the Sean Connery, which is very silly and schlocky, where he's just like an alcoholic poonhound, but then also Sean Connery takes it super seriously. And like you just see it in his interviews where you're like, sometimes you just gotta hit a bitch. I don't know what to tell you. Like women are worse than men. And it's like, oh Jesus Christ, that's right. These movies were completely self-serious.
Huh. Yeah, that's the point I'm trying to get at, is like the Bond movies are enjoyable up to a point, and then you realize exactly what's like lying underneath, or what the anthematic messages are of it. And it, I, I I don't know. I'm trying not to say that Bond is anti-woman, but like, there's it's definitely based, it's based around masculine, like being masculine, right?
Yeah,
All
yeah.
of the stereotypical masculine things is literally what Bond is, and inhabits that space.
For a while. I think Skyfall and Casino Royale in different ways challenge that pretty directly. I mean, Casino Royale
Yes.
literally has Bond's balls being tortured,
Yeah.
and then the woman is, murdered in a way that affects, like, ripples out into the other films, or like Skyfall where the villain is gay and is hitting on Bond, and then they, like, all the cameras pause and look at the camera and they're like, maybe Bond is gay too. And
Sure.
like, so I think they've made some progress in that regard, but certainly with the Connery and the Timothy Dalton, fucking Roger Moore, like all of those have no self-awareness, and Pierce Brosnan's probably the bridge upon which some of the progress was made. But
Yeah, drawing this into the Mission Impossible movies as well. Like, this movie I see as being some, I mean, it's definitely between them, like it straddles that ground. Between them, I don't know exactly visually where it would lie, but it's I don't know. I don't want to put it on a hierarchy, I guess, but Mission Impossible obviously is a lot more boom boom, like gun stunt orientation, uh than Bond is. Um
yeah, well, the Mission Impossible, I mean, those movies are really different because the I haven't seen the seventh one, but of the first six, the second through fifth are all action movies, or second through sixth are all like action movies with elements of like spy drama, Whereas the
Mhm.
first movie, I think, straddles the line a lot more clearly between like, them breaking into the thing and doing spy shit and like actual drama with moments of action. Like the set pieces are built in. Because the newer
Right.
ones are like just action. Like Fallout is just like literally fucking kablamo with the nuclear bombs and
Yes.
it's 20-minute scenes of cars just peeling off rubber and or the second one, which is directed by John Woo. So there's just an endless amount of explosions, doves, and flips being dropped on the ground as they refill the guns. As opposed to, yeah, like you're saying, like this movie is not interested in car chases. This because I just don't think, David Fincher has any interest in shooting cars that way. Like I don't think there's nothing about that like tells a story or impacts a narrative that he's interested in.
Yeah, and I really found and appreciated the fact that it was rooted in that dryness that you mentioned earlier, that he is trying to track these people down. And I mean, he dispatches of all of the bad people like very easily until he comes face to face with Creatine Brute, and his dog, um, which I mean, from a purely like action standpoint, is obviously everyone's favorite moment in the movie because it's just a fight scene that lasts for like 8 full minutes of them just breaking everything in the house along with each other.
It's pretty exhausting, like something from the raid or even a upgrade or something.
Yeah. Um, but like I just love that. Like I turned up for that scene. Um, and then like the Tilda Swinton shit happens after that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So then transitioning out of that and then him tracking her down, it it's a direct like difference obviously between how it's handled as the director, but also as Fassbender in this movie. Um yeah, I don't know what else there really is to say about this. Obviously, we're just talking about one specific movie, but kind
Mhm.
of drawing some threads between other films and where it sort of belongs. I
I
do
think we've covered a lot of the ground with it.
yeah, I don't want to waste wind here discussing anything more about it, but as I said, I think it is a movie that I will revisit in the next 5 years just because I really enjoyed it, and I think I'll probably get a little bit something more out of it in 5 years' time, just with some of the other movies that come out. Um, yeah, it never really, well, there are moments of schlock, I guess you could say, with like the fight and stuff, but I think all moments of schlock are used in a subversive nature or ironic nature. And it's meant to show you that, at least for me, no matter how much you say that you're in charge of your own life and how much you're willing to wield the tools and weapons at your disposal, uh, fate finds a way of stepping in and and causing you to be insecure. Um, and that at the end of the day, all of us are trying to have some level of security, right? And that's kind of how the movie ends. Is he has security, but security is a slippery slope. Um, and you saying that the only life path is the one behind you, that might be true, but also, I mean, he is directly planning his future and trying to accomplish his future. So
Yeah, I mean,
it's
he's
just
also
not
just
true.
not living with security. His house doesn't have windows or doors.
Correct.
Like,
Correct. And also he's not living with security because he didn't tie off or cut off that loose end.
right. But I mean, he does mention that just like killing rich people attracts more attention, and so he gambles on or puts into fate the idea that threatening a billionaire might have more effect than just killing him, because killing him might draw people to the trail of dead bodies behind him, as opposed to sort of closing the loop. And he's already killed like the whole structure around like his job.
I
Killed
think
his boss, he killed his coworkers.
I think there's also something to be said for the fact that he does feel maybe something more for this guy because it's like kind of chalked up more to like a misunderstanding that like this guy didn't really know who he was messing with or what was going to happen to him in trying to tie that loose end because I believe the guy was just like, oh, take care of that or like something along those lines.
Yeah, he said the trail should be scrubbed.
Right.
So he didn't know what that meant. I think like the billionaires, sort of brushes it off like I just didn't want it to get back to me. And of course for the killer's boss, it's just we got to kill this guy and that will end the trail.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I hate to try to make that scene into something more than it is, but when you come face to face with your adversary or face to face with who you think your adversary is, there is something to be said for like seeing them and understanding that they are a human being and maybe killing someone is not the best move, best course of action because they are human. They have a life and they have plans, they have a family, they want to keep going on, but I mean, clearly he feels something for that guy. Where I don't think he felt the same way or was able to block it out easier with the other people. The other people also were like they could physically match him, whereas this guy was just a schlub.
Well, he also like doesn't really know who he is, so that helps.
You mean the billionaire doesn't know who the killer is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that whole scene is sort of marked by the fact that the killer is pretty much silent. So most of the meaning that you ascribe to it is just going to be what you think based on the context around it and what you're getting out of the character in the movie than like what the movie is trying to say. If that
Yeah.
because like for me it was mostly just like a result of the killer trying to figure out what was happening and being like, well, if I kill him, more people might come after me. Whereas this guy doesn't know who I am or where I live. So if I let him live and threaten him, that should work better.
Right. It was
But that simplifies it a lot more than like actually diving in and looking for further
it
meaning.
it was a logical decision and a logical bet to make, but also the empathy that he talks about continually not feeling or pushing out like out of his decision making clearly also plays an impact there. Um yeah, I hope to God they don't make a second one.
Um, I yeah, that's not happening. I mean, at least not with Fincher behind directing the movie.
The reason I say that is just because the ending leaves it open to I mean it is open as a story, but it would just be so much worse.
The film didn't. We don't know how well it did because it was on Netflix and they refused to release their data.
Cool.
Um, it got like pretty good reviews from critics. It was not lauded, but it was not hated. It wasn't middling. Like people were kind of like, yeah, it's well made, but kind of weird and boring. And I assume for most people, yeah, this is more painstaking than they're willing to go with a thriller, especially when their expectation is James Bond or Mission Impossible. So I would rather we move more towards the samurai and the killer than, you know, something like that. If only because whatever the thriller is sort of a genre that is misunderstood, maybe in modern times. Or maybe it's just not something modern audiences want. They don't want sustained levels of suspense or tedium. They want something more immediate, like action.
Yeah, they just want a roller coaster ride that lasts for the amount of time that they know it will last, and then they can get off and not think. Like they don't think about it except just being like, well, that was fun. I really like that thrill because my life is really boring. So at least I got a little hit to get me through. Huh? Yeah. All right. Well, we'll catch you all later.